There's still a discussion ahead of us at the end of the day. And now the next topic is the adaptation and resilience started with cooperation and education of climate responsible architects. And here we have another speaker, architect Miroslav Marko.
So, very quick, speed on and enjoy your 20 minutes. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you, those of you who are participating and are interested in this topic, which I consider extremely important. Very quickly, I would like to refer to the last year of this conference when I was talking about the importance of a new position, which was the architect of climate resilience. And it's a normal historic development because our buildings were always more modern, there were new technologies and new procedures, and now we have come to the time when certain part of architects and landscapers and designers have to be able to coordinate and work with the climate resilience of buildings. So first, let's try to see the state of affairs. Maybe for this group of people it will look a bit weird, but we should be very open because such a serious topic such as climate change and climate resilience is also in public and in professional public is accepted that it exists. However, very lightly there is still no emergency that everybody should really relate to this topic and educate professionally to be able to react. The second issue in the current state of affairs is this a very frequent top-down system of designing. So the designer designs some constructions the best they can, then the concept is moved further and there are individual professions entering or intervening. So we are going from the biggest pipeline to the thickest cable. So then another issue in the current situation is that the adaptation to climate change is a relatively new topic because and that's why also iCARI makes research and with information we work with, I mean, they are not precisely given, assessed or evaluated, and we always have to do that. And we always have to be aware of working with the precise information, which is very complicated also because the climate change is always developing, and when we want to design buildings that will be usable in 50 or 100 years, how there will always, unfortunately, be some level of incorrectness of the prediction. And the last issue is that we have to be very open that the education system, whether of engineers, designers, landscapers, architects, is not sufficient when it comes from objective reasons, because those are organizations and institutions. So it's not has not sufficient curricula. The architects and designers should understand that climate resilience is not about implementation of energetically efficient solutions or renewable sources. It's not that easy that I design a building, then I put there some photovoltaic with a heat pump and I'm climate resilient and mission is accomplished. That's not really the case, especially when talking about resilience as such. So this approach, it's quite clear that this approach of building or developing climate resilience has to be basically integrated, which means that everybody has to participate. We all need to know the place, which means we have to know the climate hazards from the water, wind, heat, and from solids, which means some landslides. Then the designer should approach to the design of passive elements, something which doesn't require electricity, doesn't require energy, but based on physical laws, this facility is able to build the climate resilience of the building or the concept itself. In this phase, we need to have some prediction of future technical solutions. The main coordinator or the architect needs to know what technologies will come to this building to be ready. And at the end of the day, this implementation as such, which means the technical facilities and renewable resources, and that's the last phase. Yesterday, there was a lot of interest was drawn by the presentation by Mr. Masaryk, who is an expert in facilities for cooling down systems, and he said the best would be if the architects were designing buildings so that his facilities are not necessary. So that's my message. This designing process must start with some research. I found here some pictures from Brno project where we cooperated with iCARI, so which starts with like this, that we receive this documentation from 1980s and we have to get the information about the building. Then when designing or when making the design, we need to do the utilities, protection areas, inventory, and we have to precisely know the state of affairs in the buildings. Then most of the organizations, especially when speaking about the renovation of existing objects, it's a living organism, so already some processes are underway. So we have to discover whether the company doesn't have or whether they haven't started any plans, maybe some designing process, some construction permit or some concept. I have had a case that when one owner told me that here we want to have, let's say, a shooting place, and so everything needs to be taken into account. So then we have to research into the depth. We need to have, so you need to know what exactly the roof is composed of, so that you know what it can hold from the point of view of the future green roof. And then, so this was the example of public buildings, so I don't have enough time, but basically one thing is true, that any design, any creating process of environment should be based on the participation of as many people as possible. In this case, those were the students of a school. So an integrated design must start from the very beginning, and it doesn't only start with the feasibility study of the architect. It must be based on research of survey. Then you have to create the principles based on which the design is going to be executed. Then we have to, of course, include the owner, the investor, which can be the user of the building, the public or the municipality, all the stakeholders from the very beginning of the concept of the design, so that everybody brings their knowledge and participates in the process. However, this takes time. I think the representatives of municipalities are not here today, but when I hear something like city is going to make an investment, but from the budget on design, they cross out the budget from the budget for the design or the landscaper. That's terrible, because I mean it's not a legal requirement, but it's an important step in the process. So what we need to do, the procedure must be very clear. First, we do the analysis, measuring participation and service, also participation of public when speaking about the public buildings, then the design and the proposal of adaptation measures, then the project, the plan, and the purpose of the construction, and then a lot of people intervene who, especially in the phase of design, should already be included in the process so that some mistake or some shortcoming doesn't penetrate into further steps of the project documentation. Then we have, so I'm coming back to the architect. It should be somebody who will coordinate the process, and for me, this is the natural leader of the project, so either the architect or general designer. So, and this must be a very professional face, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So there are certain aspects which the architects need to pay attention to, and there are quite a lot of them. And to be able to execute the design, we need to coordinate a certain scope of the documentation in certain professions. However, when it comes to climate change and adaptation to climate change, architects have a lot of new jobs, a lot of new concepts, new tasks, new legal requirements, and basically new obligations. And for a normal person, it starts to be unbearable and not feasible. Therefore, I'm coming back to my idea that we should have a new profession, the architect of climate resilience, and especially they have to search for balance between the adaptation and mitigation in the process. So mitigation is to lowering the influence of our activities on the planet. So basically, creating the climate resilience. The ideal would be if we would be able to mitigate in such a way that there would be no CO2, which is unimaginable. So therefore, I say that in this concept, in this context, we have to focus on adaptation. So we have to create environment so that we feel the consequences of climate change as little as possible. And here comes the architect. I mean, this year was special for the construction business because we have a new construction law, which basically, I mean, this law basically doesn't know the word architect, only knows the word designer. And for them, designer is also an architect when they start working on a project. And when they do that, they become designers. Therefore, they have the obligations as per the construction law. So the natural process is that the architect becomes a general designer, is responsible for the coordination of the project parts, and also responsible for the completeness and correctness of the documentation. And we're coming to an interesting thing. Designer is liable for specification of the scope of measures and other service. And if we remember this regulation of the European Commission, which speaks about the existence of other hazards, it means that the designer should be in charge of all the surveys, and also regarding the climate hazards. And in the point 6G, it says the designer is in charge for the design of the constructions with regard to the interests of environment, and also measures to mitigate the negative impact of the climate change and adaptation to inconvenient consequences of climate change. So What it basically means is that what we are now talking about, we already have in this law, and of course, one thing is the idea of the law, and the second thing is the application in real life. However, to me, it seems that architects have already this duty, this legal duty, to make these buildings climate resilient. So the problem is we know how to do it, we know what to do it, why. However, the problem is who should do it, because we are talking about architects and designers, and now we are facing the challenge that maybe in practice, what is actually the manpower when it comes to quality and capacity? So what is the actual manpower of the architects in Slovakia? Are they able to handle all these tasks? And therefore, we need some help, we need some assistance to be able to design the buildings which will be climate resilient. And therefore, we need standards, we need some solutions that could be very easily applicable for all the systems, and we need to create connections, which means the architects need to see the providers and producers of the measures of climate resilience, or they basically need to know what it looks like. They need to have this service, so to say, and at the end of the day, the most important thing is that the system requires complete and integrated system of the education, and there must be a high level of discipline, because the architect already now needs the information from the physics, from the psychology, from landscaping, and they need to see these professionals, and they need to share the information, because none of this information, if I took my graduates, so 50 plus, had none of this information when we were attending school, or when we were studying. Okay, I missed some slide. I think there was like, thank you for your attention. So, thank you for your attention. Thank you.